Hello, fellow thinkers. We're back after a long break from, the world of philosophy. Our absence was due to a few factors, but certain issues we found within our podcast and our school life were pretty much the most important factors, and that's why we were absent for a long time. Now, we've decided that we want to improve the viewer's experience, and we know that we need to become more professional in order to be more successful. So, from now on, we plan to upload at a more stable pace. This doesn't mean that we will upload every week, but we'll try to upload at a stable pace in which you guys can effectively follow us. And also, we want to increase the quality of our content by a lot. And we're sorry for keeping you waiting, but now we're here. So we hope you enjoy this episode. And yeah, let us start. So, first of all, I would like to welcome Brandon, who's with me right now, my co host and my dear friend.
Hi, Ner. How are you?
I'm fine, I'm fine. And yeah, it's very great to have you here. And I just feel very happy to be able to record again. And this is, after all, teamwork. And we really put a lot of effort into the videos. And I know how much you do for this podcast. So thank you for that. But, anyways, we shall start now. So, now that we've gotten all the introduction out of the way, you're going to introduce the topic to you guys. So, our topic for today will be Stoicism. Now, you might say, I mean, didn't you guys do an episode on Stoicism before? Yes, we did. And our plan from now on is to revise some of our old episodes and basically, start anew with Stoicism by going more in depth with it and, with actually doing a lot of research on this topic. We want to make sure you guys learn as much as possible. So here we are. Well, okay, so Stoicism. So, Brandon, before we start, do you have any thoughts on it? What do you think about the topic? I just want to know if you feel as if you're comfortable with this topic or not.
Yeah, I don't really agree with it, but I think it's interesting. And because I know you do agree with it.
Yeah, I agree with some parts of it. You, that's what I've noticed. I haven't found any single philosophical idea that I fully agree with, which I think is really interesting. So anyway, let me define Stoicism for you. Now I will put it in my own words, and I've put it on my laptop so I could read it more clearly to you guys. So, what I've written here is Stoicism is a philosophy that aims to use self improvement and a strong stance against immorality and weakness to achieve the goal of obtaining pleasure from life through experience and virtues, and not materialism and consumerism. Well, it is based around certain virtues, which we will go over. And these virtues are vital to the way a person is recommended to live his or her life. Stoicism sees self improvement as a morally righteous action, as our lives are not only improved, but also we influence others while improving our own lives. So, Stoics basically think that God designed the universe and the rules of his actions are what we call natural law. And these natural laws come into two different kinds. I mean, one kind is physical laws. That's how the universe works, and the other kind is moral laws, and that's how Stoics see God in a pantheistic way, and meaning that they see the universe as basically just a manifestation of God, and his will upon earthly beings. The original definition of a virtue was a will that is in accordance with nature. So basically, Stoics attach a moral significance to nature because they believe it is connected directly to God. Therefore, virtuous actions are in path of good as they are in accordance with nature. So whatever we do in this philosophy has to do with nature, and it has to do with kind of a moral thinking. Um, and we're trying to be literate in that moral way of thinking so that we can basically improve ourselves and essentially, move on to a better life. What do you think about this, Brandon?
I think it's like interesting, but there's several types of things that can kind of like make it seem a little iffy for me. First, um, you have to buy into the fact, well, basically, like the way that it gets over the is-ought problem is by just assuming pantheism. And like I get that it started in a different time, but that's really like not very popular now and not very taken seriously by many serious philosophers. And that's the foundation of the whole thing. So that's the most like troubling part of it for me.
Yeah, yeah, I have to agree with you on that too. Because after all, I mean, everyone sees it in a different light, and many philosophers actually disagree with it due to the reasons you just told me. And overall, I mean, it has some problems, as you may say it, inherent within it. But at the same time, I think we must all acknowledge that it is a great way to basically see the world in a as a bigger picture and try to improve yourself in order to kind of at least change your own life so that you basically become a moral being. And by morality, I must note that it doesn't adhere to any specific religion or ideology. It just tries to make things work according to a few key virtues, which are just which make the core of Stoic philosophy.
So
So
wait, so I think it's important that the virtues are the way that Stoics would kind of like practically apply their philosophy. So a Stoic would think that virtuous actions are like in accordance with nature, and like the virtues that they would kind of seek to embody are the ones that they would think would be the most natural. And the way that they would think they're the most natural is that they'd lead somebody to success in the world because they'd think that like God would kind of make the universe in a way that what is like in accordance with him would like be successful basically.
I see. So yeah,
And
it's all about nature, as you just told me.
and so like this is mainly because Stoicism started back in ancient Greece, even though it's kind of like very different from other ancient Greek philosophies. So Stoicism is a type of virtue ethics. You might have noticed because I've been saying the word virtue like 10 times per minute. But many other ancient Greek philosophies were a lot more like rigid in like their view of God than Stoicism. Like for example, like a ton of ancient Greek philosophers were killed just for having like the
Yeah.
wrong views on God. And sometimes, so the like the founder of Stoicism is his name was Zeno, and if you read his works, he uses the word God and Zeus interchangeably, but he didn't actually mean like Zeus, like the Greek god. He thought that Zeus was a real person and like he actually was the god of thunder, but he thought there was like a bigger god that was basically nature, like that like included him kind of.
Mhm. So you're basically talking about an idea where we transform nature from just well, where we live to something that inherently influences our lives, not only in a, well, in a physical way, but also in a more organic, and also philosophical, moral way. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and that brings up another really like important point about it. So Stoics say you should act in ways that are like the most virtuous, right? But that presupposes like some degree of free will. And sure, that's fine. A ton of philosophies do that. But the problem with that is their insistence on natural law, because natural law would imply some sort of like determinism, especially with regards to physical law, which they did believe in. And the problem with that is if you say that like all actions are determined and like everything is determined, then it's like a contradiction to say that um
Prove yourself.
that you can like act at all, much less act in a virtuous way. Now, there's kind of a way that like Stoics would like get out of this. Do you like know what they would say?
Well, they would say that basically, like, uh, they would talk about how God designed nature, and by designing nature, he essentially brought upon all these factors to man's life, and thereby they affect a man so much that, well, he has to act virtuously to improve himself.
Well,
How do you think they will respond?
I think it would be a little different because this is what I just kind of thought of while you were saying that. So they would say that because like God is nature and humans are natural, that like whatever God has determined is also kind of humans determining stuff. So they can kind of sidestep the whole issue, but then it kind of begs the question on like, does God have any authority? Because
Yeah.
then it's basically just like equivocating like different definitions of God basically, and they'd only get their like moral authority through equivocation, and that's kind of a whole other problem.
Yeah. So, there are many problems inherent with it, like that come with Stoicism. But I think the most important problem, as you just said, was, well, the issue of free will versus determinism in Stoicism. A lot of isms, as you might notice.
Yeah,
Yeah, criticism of Stoicism basically comes from free will, and it's contradictory points between free will and
but
determinism.
something important is that you don't have to believe it's morally right to kind of agree with some of its teachings, because it could also just improve your life, even if you kind of just see it as like a helpful tool, right?
Yeah, and I think that's how I tend to view Stoicism also. For example, I really like the points, some of the virtues it's, well, talking about. So basically, there are four distinct virtues that the majority of Stoics scholars agree upon, and those are wisdom, temperance, courage, and then justice.
So,
So, would you like me to explain those?
yeah, yeah.
Basically, wisdom. When we talk about wisdom, we talk about the ability to realize important aspects of our lives. I mean, it is vital for us to see what is right, wrong, or completely like mixed up. Um, so a stoic is wise in that he thinks things through and, well, thinks rationally. That's the most important part. While looking at the bigger picture. So he's able to take his emotions, but he's able to basically filter out what he's looking at. So he might look at stuff emotionally, but also, most importantly, he will definitely look at them rationally. And the reason I say this is because when you look at Marcus Aurelius, he always talks about how he basically kind of like judges certain actions about whether they're virtuous or not. But and I think most of his judging comes from like some kind of like emotional thought at the same time. Don't you agree?
The thing is, Marcus Aurelius, well, he was Roman and he came at a lot later time than like the founders of Stoicism.
I
So,
think it's still important to acknowledge his role because like most of the Stoics today, they basically everyone has a different version of Stoicism. I think we should get that clear first. I mean, not everyone, but the majority of the people who talk about Stoicism, especially Marcus Aurelius, who came at a later time, as you mentioned, they have a different view of Stoicism. And I think it is perfectly justified for him to kind of like talk about how his uh, basically how his thought of uh, thinking things through rationally, but at the same time, kind of seeing some things emotionally and making basically understanding them is well basically important to maintaining his moral guidance.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say because he was like a really important guy in his own time. But most like Stoic knowledge is based off of his works because after like the fall of the Roman Empire, for a while they didn't have access to any of like Zeno or any of like the other Stoic philosophers back in ancient Greece, but they did have Aurelius. And he represented a change in Stoicism as it kind of became less like dogmatic, um, and it kind of like morphed a little bit.
I
And
definitely agree, and when you say that it becomes less dogmatic. Yeah, continue, please.
so like that's because like a ton of ancient Greek philosophy was kind of viewed at, like a lot more like strictly and as like you can't disagree with me or I'm like gonna murder you. And philosophy like kind of went into every part of ancient Greek life. So if you like disagreed with someone on anything pretty much, like in a and like it was a serious disagreement that had like philosophical implications, they would murder you. Like for example, this is like a funny example, but like Pythagoras, like the guy of the Pythagorean
Yeah, killed his
theorem,
own student.
yeah, he killed his own student because his student believed in like irrational numbers and like he proved it, and so he murdered him.
I know. But at the same time, there are many. Yeah, you're completely right. But at the same time, I think we must acknowledge that the ancient Greeks were, I mean, a lot more tolerant than maybe other cultures during the time. When we see, for example, Alexander the Great and his mentors basically discussing philosophy as a whole. And I think that's why it is vital for us to value them. But at the same time, you're also completely right when you say that well, the Romans were a lot more tolerant than the Greeks.
Yeah, because by the time of Marcus, wait, was Marcus Aurelius like during the time when Christianity was kind of starting to like spread?
Yeah, it was like he was after. So basically, you should see Christianity as a marking point. So he was before Constantine. So basically, he was around the time when Christianity spread, but it wasn't like so widespread like
Oh,
during his
okay.
time, but it was still like there.
Yeah. So then I think that like basically the thing that we both agree on about Stoicism is that it's pretty useful if you like apply it in your life. So like, do you have any examples of that?
Me applying it in my own life.
Yeah.
Well, since we were talking about wisdom, let me give you a like an example of me using wisdom. I always use wisdom. For example, um, I try to go to the gym because I although I see gym as something that can tire me and that takes a lot of time, I still see it as a valuable investment, because it basically is something that I see it as a natural thing, because I mean in today's world I don't think we get the exercise unless you really do something like sports. So that's why I see it as a natural thing. And that's why I love to, well, go ahead and exercise and hit the gym every once in a while.
Yeah, like besides that, so that's like
And one
wisdom.
more thing, and I also see it as something that like basically improves me. So yeah, that's another reason why.
So the other values or the other virtues, um, temperance, courage, and justice. Those are the four. So wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice make up the four main ones.
Mhm.
And those were obviously just what the ancient scholars thought was like the most sorry, like the most important. But like I think it's important to define them because they're not really the same as we think of them now. So, Nur, how would you define temperance?
Okay, so that's okay. So basically, temperance is, I see it as kind of a view of life and a lifestyle where we realize that there are so many distractions in our daily lives, but we still find ourselves, able to do what we need to do in a way. So that basically is our effort towards enlightenment, because I mean every day we you come across so many like hardships and so many events where you want to kind of like just give up, or and you just don't want to go ahead with it anymore. But temperance in a way basically kind of helps you helps you hold your own thoughts, hold your own stoic thoughts, and keep your virtues, because as Aurelius puts it, every man has perfect freedom provided that he holds himself from mundane desires. Actually, no, sorry, hold on. That is not from Aurelius. That's from the history of Western philosophy. So just so you guys know, wrong quote there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Um,
And but Marcus Aurelius has another quote. He says that ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? So, is what you're doing or what you have right now really necessary to your betterment? And I think that's a question many of us ask ourselves, but at the same time, you're so, covered with like our materialistic needs that we just forget our what we need in our lives immediately.
yeah, like basically temperance is just thinking forward and controlling yourself like in light of that, just to make it simple. And then like
Yeah.
the other two are courage and justice. They're actually like simpler. So courage is basically just having like will that's able to like stand up
And the
and
courage to fight.
yeah, the courage to fight. And
Basically, like you cannot just give up, even if you know that you're going to, even if you know that like you, even if you don't want to fight something, even if you say that, oh, this is going to, um, yeah, I don't want to do this really. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I'm really scared of this. You still have to find the courage to like lift yourself up and fight for what you think is necessary.
yeah. And then justice is basically acting towards others in like a moral way and trying to like promote moral like the most correct way to act towards others and trying to promote that. And so what that means is that when you're gonna act in some way that like has an impact to someone else, you have to make sure you're not screwing someone over. So it's pretty simple.
I definitely agree. And I will expand it so that we mention another thing. I think, well, justice is kind of hard to explain. Do you know why? The reason why I say that is because, well, justice isn't something that you can just, it's not something that just applies to you. It also applies to other people. So at this point, you're taking essentially, especially if you're in a position of power, you can basically take another person's fate in your hands, which is, I think, really important. And I really feel like a stoic would be really excited at that moment because he knows that he has been virtuous and he basically can make or break someone's life in a way, especially in an important moment, such as if you want to hire someone, you have to be just. You can't just show nepotism or any kind of like discrimination. Or at the same time, you can't just, well, if you're a judge and you have to, well, be just because that people trust you. I feel like that also puts a lot of weight on our shoulders. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's like really, sorry. On one hand, it's like empowering. On another hand, it's scary. But like when you realize that your actions, I mean, when you realize your actions have consequences and that you're kind of like, you're not on your own, but you're kind of your own person. And you have to be like very like conscientious in how you act towards other people. And in my view, that kind of means that like wisdom, it can kind of be extended into all of the other like virtues of Stoicism. And that like that means you can pretty much sum up Stoicism as just trying to be the wisest you can possibly be with a little bit of like weird pantheism added on.
Yeah, that's a good way to summarize and, make it personal for you as well. Well, I realized that Stoics tend to handle success better too. I mean, and by Stoics, I'm not saying people who are basically, morally and philosophically Stoics and also ideologically. I'm talking about people who just practice Stoicism and they don't even know it. These people are really, able to handle success well instead of basically suffering from their own success and making wrong decisions. I think this is due to their training about like seeing how it's all natural and organic, that we rise and fall, and that it's our job to basically improve ourselves um in the worldview of, well, today, especially because um people right now, especially, I feel like people are really stuck in the modern world and people really can't find an escape route. So that's why stoicism is able to give them that motivation to go forward and find the courage and, show some temperance. Not only that, but also another virtue, be just, and also be wise and make good decisions. So I feel like even if you're not a stoic, if you, practice these traits in your daily life, I think then you're close to stoicism, and I feel like you can really learn more about this.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of think that's a great way to like wrap up this topic because the thing about Stoicism is that even though it kind of started out as like a very like dogmatic one set of like beliefs,
Mhm.
that's kind of like a really irrelevant way to talk about it. And so you can't really like it, it would make no sense if we were to do a podcast episode just basically based off Zeno's beliefs. And so I
Yeah, and that's why, like, we could have just talked about Zeno or Marcus Aurelius and what they lived through for about, like, what, 5 to 10 minutes, and that could have just been the episode. But no, we wanted to bring you guys some kind of idea about how Stoicism existed back in the day, but also how it affects us today. Because I feel like, these philosophies and these philosophical thoughts we're learning every day, they have no meaning to us unless we can really practice them in our own personal lives. So, while before we end, Brandon, I want to ask you, has there ever been a moment in your life where you felt like a stoic?
um I don't know if there was a time when I ever felt like a stoic, like consciously, but
How about acted like a
I
stoic?
know there's certainly been like some time or another when I've acted like a stoic, even if it was kind of unintentional.
Mhm.
Um, maybe if I just like thought before I like did something like rashly, or just like even no matter like how simple it was, maybe that, yeah, if I just like before I said something stupid, I just kind of like held my breath and just thought about it in my head, even though that's like so minor, it's kind of an example of how you would actually apply this, like without even having ever heard of Stoicism.
I feel like that is a great example that you just told us. I mean, stoicism doesn't just have to be, well, you know, doesn't just it doesn't have to be like pure self-improvement either. I feel like, and I'm talking about my version of it now. I mean, I'm also trying to like bring my personal views on this to you guys. So, my personal view on stoicism is I don't think I would ever believe in stoicism as a pure ideology or a pantheist philosophy. But I think I believe in the fundamental actions that it basically does and the role model it provides for us. And I think that's the biggest thing we can take away from this. Now, um, because in the end, I mean, I feel like what we should remember from this episode should be that there are certain aspects of stoicism which can really benefit us, as I've mentioned them before. But at the same time, there are also like a lot of conflicts in stoicism. To I'm trying to conclude here how basically there are a lot of positives to it, but at the same time, the thought of stoic thought basically dismantles itself when it comes to the idea of free will versus determinism. So we were doing a lot of research, and Brandon, we came across a very important question, didn't we? And we couldn't really find an answer to this.
About
Now,
like, do you mean about how a Stoic would view like free will and determinism?
yes. So we really read a lot about we really read segments from Bertrand Russell's book, uh, History of Western Philosophy. It's a really great book, and we really recommend it to you guys. It's a really good book if you want to get into philosophy. But anyway, he um he sums up the points really well, but at the same time there are certain discrepancies. So would you like to kind of get into that, Brandon?
The discrepancies between what?
Between, well, how a stoic might view free will, but at the same time a deterministic view of free
Oh,
will.
so like basically the idea is that I kind of talked about this earlier,
Yeah, you
but
did. But I just want you to get into like the literal views between like free will and determinism in stoicism.
sure. So like a Stoic believes that humans like have free will, and that like every action we take is at some level a choice, even if it can be coerced or whatever, it's still like not determined basically. But they also believe that like natural law is kind of the way everything works, and therefore um, you can't like nothing can happen that isn't like caused by natural law. But if it's caused by natural law and there isn't any alternative to it, then that would imply that it's not a choice because like generally the idea of a choice is that there's an alternative. And if there's no alternative and everything is just determined by natural law, then how would you act virtuously? How would you even act? Everything would just be like caused by like basically like the laws of physics.
Exactly.
But I mean, once you consider like I said earlier, once you consider how stoicists, yeah, once you consider how they view God, it kind of like solves that because humans are included within God as humans are included in nature, and basically God equals nature for pantheists, and they're pantheists. So once you consider that, it's not really a paradox, but if you like accept my like simplified argument right there, then you also have to accept that there's no moral consideration like you could ever like give it at all, because you're basically just saying that nature follows the laws of of nature, which like wow, that's such a like amazing statement nobody would ever have thought of.
Yeah. Bertrand Russell talks about this, and he says there are obvious logical difficulties about the doctrine of Stoicism. If virtue is really the sole good, a beneficent providence must be solely concerned to cause virtue, yet the laws of nature have produced abundance of sinners. If virtue is the sole good, there can be no reason against cruelty and injustice, since, as the Stoics are never tired of pointing out, cruelty and injustice afford the sufferer the best opportunities for the exercise of virtue. If the world is completely deterministic, natural laws will decide whether I shall be victorious or not. If I'm wicked, nature compels me to be wicked, and the freedom which virtue is supposed to give us is not possible for me.
Yeah, that's another
So he
thing.
basically sums it up here, and I think it's a good note to kind of answer that question, which is kind of supposed to be unanswerable in Stoicism.
I mean, the good thing is that it's not some like rigid dogma, and that
Yeah,
it's kind of up to each individual Stoic how they see it.
you're very lucky on that. Well, yeah. Do you wish to add anything else?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, I do think that way as well. So, to end this, so thank you all guys for watching. We are very happy that you are still with us and you're watching our podcasts every once in a while. We've really tried to, get back into it with, especially with this podcast. But remember, we're all very busy, and you know, it takes some time to upload and record actually. But thank you all for watching our episode today. We hope to see you guys later.
Well, there's
And
actually one more thing.
yeah,
Next week, so we're gonna be back to like a regular schedule. Next week, we're gonna be covering like so we said at the start of this episode that we're gonna be redoing like some of the episodes that we feel we kind of just didn't do that well on. But we're also gonna go into like deep into some other topics and specifically like medical ethics because we think it's really interesting. And so you might expect a episode on that next week.
yeah, next week, if not the week later, because we're still trying to make room for it in our lives. So, but all we can do right now is thank you guys for sticking with us and watching our podcast, no matter how late we can be. Oh, thank you all. And well, yeah, it's been about 40 minutes, so we should wrap up soon. Um, Thank you all again. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and also comment on this video. We love to hear your thoughts on it, and also it encourages us to do more of this. Oh, thank you all. Now we will say goodbye.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
See you.
Thank you.